What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of the anime film sensation Suzume from Makoto Shinkai, also known as Suzume no Tojimari, which translates to Suzume's Locking Up. This, of course, is the latest anime film from Makoto Shinkai, the modern anime maestro, the modern master of anime filmmaking, honestly. Produced by Comics Wave Films, which has produced many of his films and has released just recently, this past weekend, in wide release in the United States after coming out in Japan and elsewhere in the world. And it's notable for a few reasons. One, the latest Shinkai film. Shinkai, of course, has made several movies, but really exploded with the masterpiece Your Name, which came out in 2016, which he followed up with Weathering with You 2019, and now Suzume. And Suzume had a big performance in Japan, but notably actually outgrossed its Japan box office in China. The first time that a Japanese film has outgrossed the local market in China, the first anime film to gross $100 million in a territory outside of Japan. And as a result of this, it's the fourth highest grossing anime film of all time, over $260 million worldwide. Really impressive. It's not going to be as big as Your Name, but still a very big success for sure. If anything, the pretty paltry performance of this film in the United States is my biggest disappointment about it. But clearly, the Makoto Shinkai brand is strong in Asia and elsewhere in the world, and hopefully, the United States can eventually catch up. Because what I think is so appealing about him as a filmmaker is that he has, I think, a really cool lens in terms of how he approaches his storytelling and really gets the most out of the anime form. And I think that's just really appealing. And we know how big and global anime is. Of course, Demon Slayer 2 years ago became the highest grossing anime film of all time. Demon Slayer, a massive new franchise from its very inception to get as big as it is. Anime is gigantic. And I think there's room for the more like artsier or just straight up not made for teen boys anime the way something like Suzume is. So hopefully we will get to that point. Clearly, anime is still on the most upward trajectory. Anyway, Suzume, it's a film that takes place in the modern world, which I think is a really cool trademark of Shinkai's recent work. The presence of social media, like modern technology, is really fun in these movies. Definitely a nice contrast from the Miyazaki Studio Ghibli comparisons that Shinkai often gets due to his talent as a creator. Um, it certainly makes sense to position Shinkai as like the successor to the Miyazaki mantle, but I think he has a really different approach to how he makes movies, and it's really cool that we can get something that like this. And Suzume, which is about a 17-year-old high school student who Suzume, who encounters a older university student named Sota, and they very quickly realize that Suzume realizes that she is involved in this basically jet setting effort to stop ecological disaster across the nation of Japan. And what she has to do basically is like close off these gateways to prevent this like demonic worm basically coming from this other dimension, the ever after, and crashing down on Japan and causing earthquakes and tsunamis and whatnot. And it's a really obvious parallel to the 2011 Tohoku earthquake specifically. And I think what's interesting if you read a lot of like comments and reviews about Suzume is a lot of people are describing it to be more of a romance, the way like Your Name and Weathering with You clearly are. And there's a romantic element to Suzume. It comes in the second half of the mid film. But to me, like the themes of how Sota and Suzume have to close these gates to prevent the worm, they have to remember the people lost in that location. These gates no longer appearing at abandoned places, whether it's an amusement park that's now closed or a school that doesn't work anymore. Whatever it is, there's a few different locations. They have to kind of remember like the past, basically, and it's kind of a, I think, obvious like homage to those lost in the 2011 disaster. You know, that seems to be what this movie is about, and where it's all kind of circling back to. Whereas the romance angle, like there is there, but it kind of comes apart or comes about kind of quickly in the second half of the film. So I wouldn't really put it as like a romance first type movie. It's not really about that. Um, I think there's some really brilliant like decisions in Suzume. One of those would be that very quickly we encounter a obvious Ghibli um, nod, which would be this cat character, Daijin, this cat who can talk to Suzume and is involved with the gates. And I don't really get into the details of it, but it's really obvious, like Ghibli nod so much so that like a passerby in the film sees the cat running and like remarks that she's in Whisper of the Heart, a Ghibli movie. It's kind of funny that Suzume takes place in a world where the Studio Ghibli movies have also come out already and exist. Pretty funny. But that cat, Daijin, um, that's a really important presence because the cat curses Sota, and Sota, for the majority of the film, is not in his handsome, dreamy university self. He is a chair, a sentient children's chair that you sit on. He can run around, he can still talk, but he's a chair. And watching the chair run around is really fun, but also like that connection that Suzume and Sota has, where Sota needs Suzume, literally needs her to help him get around and do his mission because he's been cursed into being a little baby chair. It's both funny, but also I think a really like specific way to have you connect with these two characters and connect with their very unique specific relationship that they're forming in real time. That I think is probably like the best aspect of the film. When we get into some of like Suzume's personal life, notably losing her mother in I believe it was a tsunami. Like again, the parallels to real life are pretty obvious. But yeah, I just really enjoyed the journey, and even if it doesn't like reach the emotional stratospheric highs that Your Name does, obviously that's okay. Like Shinkai can't make a 10 out of 10 every single time, nor should we expect him to. But he's a really engaging filmmaker. For I just think like the fact that he can make a light romantic film that clearly is inspired by real Japanese history, connect that to you in a modern day story is really cool. Weathering with You similarly was a romantic story first, the way Your Name is, but also had a really clear ecological, climate change undercurrent to it. So the fact that he's able to meld multiple themes into really engaging stories is a lot of fun. I think the Suzume character is very familiar to some of his other female protagonists, so not like it's anything super new, but man, just spending time in the worlds he makes, I think, is a lot of fun. And yeah, I hope keeps working. He's still pretty young; he's like 50 years old, but he's like he's pretty clearly the number one, Japanese filmmaker. So unfortunately for him, of course, when it comes to the Oscars, I'd be definitely pulling for this the best animated feature film nomination, especially after Your Name was grievously snubbed. But Miyazaki's final film, How Do You Live, is coming out, this summer in Japan anyway. So big competition. But yeah, really cool to see Suzume have such big success in the United States or in the world. And I wish, hopefully in the future, he can get more success in the United States. We'll see. But let me know how'd you feel about Suzume. How'd you compare it to Shinkai's past few films? And for more movie reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.